Hello, everybody. It's Sarah from My Handmade Wardrobe and Crafty Sew&So. How are you today? I am coming to you at 1 p.m. on Thursday, as usual, to carry on with our sew along, making a dress for the Crafty Sewing Camp, which is next week. Oh my God, I can't believe it. It's so soon. And yeah, normally at this point, me and Freya would be in kind of panic mode going, oh, we've forgotten. But actually, it's the third time of us running it. Everything seems to be going really smoothly. We've had lots of things arriving for the camp. So we've had all the goodie bag bits and pieces arrive. We've got the stickers arriving today. So you're going to get a lovely welcome pack when you arrive, which has a gorgeous Crafty Sew&So sticker on it. And you can use those as project bags. So you can take them wherever with you and tell everybody how amazing the Crafty Sewing Camp was, hopefully. And yeah, just share a bit of the joy and love afterwards. But that pack will contain everything that you need for the weekend, which is super exciting to be able to give everybody everything that they need to know so everybody can just take it all in, then relax into their sewing time and totally lose themselves for the weekend. So, yeah, what am I making today? Well, I am continuing making my shared dress for the Wild West themed party. Now, I'm at this point where it's all looking a bit confusing because I've got like a sleeve inside a bodice, which is eventually, hopefully, going to be gathered with some elastic. So at this point, it's all looking a bit funny. Until recently, I just had two fish. So these basically, the sleeves looked a bit like fish, so that's quite funny. But yes, now I have joined the underarm seam and I have inserted one of them, and I'm going to insert the other sleeve alongside you. So until up to last week, at the end of the sew along last week, I think I'd got up to the point of doing most of the shearing of one panel, so the front panel, let's say. I've now done the back panel as well, so I've completed that. And then I used my template to cut the shaping. So you basically use your template to cut this little armhole shaping bit. And I really like this pattern. It's really, really easy to use. I am, as always, just going a bit off instruction, but yeah, it was really, really straightforward for me to put together. And I think it would be for most beginners if you follow the instructions. So, yeah, what do you need to know? Things that I've done differently, slightly differently. I decided to overlock the entire top edge and I haven't done the bottom edge because that's going to attach to the skirt. Once I'd finished shearing the panels, I actually joined them together and then overlocked the seam together, just because I didn't want any of that shearing. You can see, actually, I'll show you the side that I did with some coloured elastic to make this really clear. So you can see that the elastic here is actually just cut off. When you use the pattern to create the shaping, you also have to cut down the sides to make it the right size for you. So yeah, at that point, I really needed to make sure that none of these little bits of elastic are going to kind of pull out as it's worn, because I've had that before with shearing where I've basically like done too small a seam allowance and it just needs yeah, a little bit more. So I've done a nice chunky 1.5 centimeter seam allowance as is specified on the pattern, but then I've not trimmed anything off. I've just overlocked the two layers together just to keep them really, really secure, because I don't want anything pinging out as I'm wearing it. And actually, I can see on the other side one bit has already started to ping out, so that's something you need to be really careful of. Is just here, you can see it's just pinged out. Now at this point, what I can do is I can just pull that elastic, and this tends to happen at the ends of rows of sewing. So I can pull the elastic and either hand sew, or if I've got a loose bit of thread, which I think yes, I have. So I've got my elastic and a loose bit of thread there, and I can just tie those off before it unpings any further. Technical terms here, unpings. But yeah, it's really important to just catch those and make sure that that's not happening with anything else. I actually think that's where my bobbin of elastic ran out just as I was getting to the end of my stitching. So I don't think that's anything to do with having actually cut off the shearing. So that's kind of reassuring, because if that's the case, it's hopefully not going to happen with any of the other bits. But yeah, that is the problem with working with elastic. Obviously, it stretches, and sometimes it doesn't stay where you told it to stretch to. You might have told it to stretch to a certain place, and then unless you stitch over it very, very thoroughly, or you stitch it in with a needle and thread, then it can ping and come undone, and then you end up with a slightly baggier garment than you were expecting. So I'm just going to check all of those seams to make sure that they're all nice and secure, which, yeah, they definitely are. If you are worried, you can always go over your side seams again, just to give them a double kind of reinforcement. That's a really good idea. Make sure you don't have your stitch length too long, because if the stitch length is too long, it's not going to hold the elastic in place. But yeah, I think I'm confident about that. I might, before attaching the skirt, I might just add another row of stitching just to really secure that. But yeah, so what I've done, and I'll do this along with you. So I've already inserted one of the sleeves. So what I did was I took my sleeve and I placed it with the wrong size together. Now this fabric does have a wrong side, so I've got daisies on the right side and no daisies on this side, so that makes it nice and easy. So I'm just going to pop a pin in the top, and then at the point where I need everything to line up where the other elastic is, I'm going to pop a pin down there because I want that to be aligned. Everything else can kind of nestle into each other as I sew. Okay. So start off, as always, with a bit of back stitching, and like I said, we're doing a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance here to make sure that it's correct for the pattern, but also that everything stays securely together. If you do find you're making a woven garment and the seam allowances are less than 1.5 centimetres, it's often worth actually adding a bit of extra seam allowance, because of course the thing with woven garments is that they're not going to stretch, or the fabric isn't going to stretch. So if you feel like you might need just a little bit of extra wiggle room in certain places, it's a good idea, and especially if you fabric frays, to add a little bit extra seam allowance to your pattern pieces. And remember that the point that you're using your pattern pieces to cut out your fabric is the point that you're most in control of what's going on. So you have the option at that point to add extra to make your life easy. So do it if you are at all concerned. It's always a good idea. Okay, so I'm just sewing all the way down to the end. Now my elastic isn't totally aligned at the bottom here, but it is virtually aligned. I'm not going to worry too much about it. Yeah, because it is the undersleeve and you can't really see it that much, and that's the benefit of using a patterned fabric if this is the first time of you doing shearing. Well, there's lots of benefits actually, especially using a check or a stripe. Stripes might be a little bit more advanced, because if you do get wobbly lines, it's more obvious. But with the checks, especially a small check like this, you can really use them like I did last week to guide your shearing, and it saves drawing loads and loads of lines on. So that's the skirt panels. I don't need those. So like I said, I have joined the side seams of my shirred panels, and turn this to face you. So I've got my underarm just here. I'm just going to trim that off to make it really nice and neat, because we don't need anything else getting in the way at this point. So I've got my underarm seam, and turn it to face me. So I'm looking at the right side, and I want to take my sleeve and turn it the right way out. Okay. So then I've got my right side of my sleeve against the right side of my fabric, and I'm going to align that underarm seam on my sleeve with the side seam on the bodice. And then on my sleeve, you can only just still see them, but I've got little notches. They're slightly covered up by the overlocking, but if you cut your notches in like this, you can still see them when you overlock. If you cut them out, well, then you tend to cut them off, and you're going to need them throughout the project. So that's why I always snip in a 0.5 centimetre notch instead of cutting notches outwards. So my notch, and I'm going to take my edge of my bodice panel and just align those. Okay, and I'm going to do that front and back. So far I've got pins in at my underarm, and I've got pins in at my top. And as a general rule, that's basically what you need to do whenever joining a piece to a piece. You're looking for any kind of cues of where to line things up. So notches, seams, etc. So line those up first, and then everything else will kind of slot into place. So that's particularly important with this, because we've got these bits that are kind of gathered with the, well, kind of gathered, completely gathered with the shearing, and it's not going to sit flat. So what you need to do is kind of like squidge is the most technical term I can think of, the sheared panel onto the flat sleeve armhole bit here. So you can see here I've got some like extra fabric just here, and as I sew I'm just gonna have to kind of squidge it into submission to make it all sit together. But the good thing is, because I've got loads of shearing, any extra little puckers and things like that will just kind of blend in with that. So this is why shearing is quite a forgiving technique. You might feel a bit overwhelmed doing the huge panels. You know, you start off with so much fabric and then you reduce it with the elastic, and you still think, oh my goodness, there's a lot going on there, and it's so bouncy. But actually, if you sew on the right side of the pins in there, if you sew on the flat side of the sleeve and just kind of like be aware of what's going on underneath, but not worried about it, then it's actually really fun to sew. So I'm just going to bring that down so you can see a bit more of what I'm sewing. So I'm basically starting at the just before the top edge of the front bodice. So I've got my little finished edge there. So I'm starting to sew on the sleeve just before that. I'm going to back stitch just a couple of stitches just to make sure that that's all secure. And then I'm going to sew around this curve. Just trying to keep that top layer as flat as possible. If you end up with a couple of little pleats and gathers, don't worry too much. They're going to be underneath the arm, and also they're going to just kind of blend in with the shearing. So don't worry too much. Okay, so I'm getting towards the top edge of my bodice again. Make sure nothing's going off. A little bit, and then I'm just back stitching at the end. Okay, and I now have, I'll turn this all the right way out. I now have my sleeves attached to my bodice. Ta-da! Yeah, that's looking nice. Now, if I was to wear it like this, obviously, it's going to be a bit low. And yeah, it's just basically going to fall off. So we need some elastic in here to gather this all up, create that nice puffy sleeve head, and also keep it on my shoulder. So I have cut myself some strips of elastic. They're basically going from here at the front to the same place in the back. I've cut them a bit longer so that I can actually trim them down. And what I plan to do is to make the channels and then thread the elastic through and then secure it with a bit of stitching. So I've already finished the edges of my sleeve head with overlocking. So I did that before. And I'm just going to take 1.5 centimetre seam allowance all the way around the seam allowance, the sleeve head, just turning 1.5 centimetres in on itself. Now I'm going to start just above the finished edge of the bodice. So I've got a bit of space for my elastic to go in. I'm not putting elastic down here because this bit we want to be flat. There's so much going on. Elastic across here, and then you've got the sleeve. You don't want more gathers and things happening under here. It's just going to be messy, basically. So I'm just going to start stitching from that top edge. Okay, and I think I said I'm taking 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, but I'm actually sewing 1 centimetre in because I have some quite narrow elastic and I don't want it to be kind of swimming around. Now, one thing that you're going to have to do whilst you're doing this is you're sewing around a curve. So it's going to be tricky. You're going to end up with a few little pleats on the inside of your fabric. I really wouldn't, if I were you, recommend that you pin this. I would just kind of go with it and be a bit kind of relaxed about it being a consistent 1 centimetre. I'll just move this out the way so that you can see what I'm doing. So as I go round, I'm just using my fingers to kind of hold that seam allowance, but not worrying too much about what's going on down here. I'm dealing with it in kind of 5 centimetre chunks, I would say, 5 to 10 centimetre chunks. And then as I get round a bit of corner, just turning over that hem. Because if you try and do too much, you end up with so many little pleats and gathers. It can feel a bit like out of control, basically. And yeah, the key to getting this right is feeling in control, even if well, no, you are in control. But also feeling that you are in control, having that confidence. So I'd love to hear from you if you are going to the Crafty Camp and if you've been making anything, or if you've pulled out any previously me-made makes. I know a lot of people are saying that they're wearing check shirts and shorts or jeans. We've got a few people that have been on our jeans making course that are going to be debuting their jeans for the first time on in front of all their fellow sewists. There's a few people that have been on the jeans course together that are coming to the camp, which is really nice. It's always good to kind of enable a reunion of that. And yeah, there's a few people making jeans at camp, so we might try and put them in a sewing room together. Yeah, I'll tell you a bit more about how we've been communicating actually, and if you are coming to sewing camp, yeah, how you can get ready for it with us. But yeah, I'm just getting to the end of this channel. So I've got to the end, I've got to the top edge again, top finished edge, And I'm just going to backstitch. Just a little, forward stitch a little, cut it off. And now I have a nice channel for my elastic to go through. Now, as you might see, I've got a little bit of waving here. And that happens basically when you're turning over a curved edge and the seam allowance slips a little down. Doesn't matter. Honestly, you're going to be putting elastic in here and it's all going to be gathering up. So you're just not going to notice that at all. So if you do have a bit of that, don't worry, it's absolutely fine. If it's extreme, you're going to need to unpick and do again. But a little bit of waving like that is totally normal, acceptable, and expected. So what I'm going to do is I am going to grab a safety pin. I'm going to grab my elastic and I'm going to thread it through the little channel that we've created. So going in under the arm there, just going to start to poke that through. So when you're threading elastic through, it's always like a push and pull, and push as much as you can get of the channel fabric onto the safety pin and then pull. Push as much as you can get on and pull. But there is a really important thing to remember to do before you go too far. So as you can see, I've put in a fair bit there and I've got a little bit hanging out here, but not a lot. So at this point, I'm just going to get this elastic and I'm going to choose a nice little pin and I'm going to pin that elastic to the underarm, to the bottom of the channel where I started, just so that it's not going to ping in and I'm not going to lose it because I haven't got a lot left. So this channel, the elastic is going to cause this channel to start gathering soon. And I'm going to end up with this elasticated sleeve head. So I don't want to lose my elastic at the other end because I haven't sewn it in place yet. We'll do that. I mean, what you could do at this point is on one end, just sew it in place because you know that that end is going to be the correct, that's going to be fine, but you can't obviously just do that straight away when the elastic starts to come out the other end of the channel, as it is now, because you need to try this on and check it. Make sure that it is the right size. So I'm going to use a safety pin and I'm just going to pin the elastic into the underarm. Make sure that that's nice and secure. I'm going to go back now and I'm just going to encourage the rest of this elastic here into the channel. I'm just going to encourage that to pop on in. Yep, that has popped on in. And then just make sure that that elastic doesn't go anywhere. And at the bottom where I finished sewing my channel, so I've got my channel and I've got my edge of my bodice. Hold it like that, that's better, isn't it? I'm just going to sew across a couple of times just to really secure the elastic in place and make sure that that doesn't ping out anywhere. So I'm just going to top stitch it just underneath where the finished edge of the bodice is. And I'll just go backwards and forwards a few times. Again, another benefit of having the very patterned fabric. I can do that, and it's not going to show, which is fab. One thing I've noticed is that on the underarm, the elastic is starting to ping out a little bit. So I'm just gonna give that another little sew over because I really don't want it to ping out. It's not something that I am willing to accept. Right. That looks fine. You know, there's a lot of conversation about like the insides of your garments should be as beautiful as the outside, and I do agree they should be. For me, like I get a lot of joy out of seeing beautiful insides of garments with labels and finishing, but you've got to be realistic about the techniques that you're using, the time that you have, and how much wear the garment's going to get. Now, if you want this to be something that you're going to be wearing over and over and over and over and over, sometimes it's worth just doing a few extra rows of stitching just to make sure that everything stays in the right place, rather than worrying about the insides being absolutely beautifully perfect. Because if you don't do those extra rows of stitching on the inside and perhaps things get a little bit messy, then things are going to start coming undone on the outside. And that isn't something that really is going to look good to anybody. Only you know what's going on the inside of your garments. Just caught a little bit of the bit that I didn't want to, so oh dear. Excuse me. I'm just checking before I start unpicking. I'm not unpicking anything that is going to affect other bits. Nope. Okay. I've got a wonderful thread cutter on this machine, but there's still always a few threads that need to be chopped. Always the way. Right, so now I've got my nice gathered sleeve. But I think there's a possibility that that is actually going to be a bit too big. And especially since I haven't added any elastic to the top, I think what we could find is that it's actually a little bit too baggy. So what I'm going to do is just pop this on. And this doesn't have a front and a back, so either way can be the front, either way can be the back. And I'll just slip this on and see how it feels. So at the moment I have the this side done, and yeah, that's just going to be falling down all the time. So at this point, what I can do is I've got my sleeve, my elastic securely fastened at the back here, and just want to make sure that everything's in the right place so that we get a realistic gather. Sorry, a realistic fitting, I should. So I can just pull this elastic. I just pull it until it feels secure, but not too tight. Wow, that's some serious puff. That's really fun. I don't often wear puffy sleeves, so it feels a bit kind of, oh, I'm not sure. But yeah, I think with the skirt, that's going to look pretty awesome. Yeah, I like that a lot. Right, so I would say that that is looking about right. So I've taken off 7 centimetres, 8 centimetres roughly. So what I can do is I'm just going to really pull it in, because I really, really don't like it when you're constantly like adjusting your dress so that it covers your bra straps. I like it to be tighter rather than anything. I think that's about right. And then I'm going to take my safety pin and I'm going to pin that elastic to a point a little bit further down than where I'm going to sew, and then I don't need to move it. I can just sew along this bit without removing the safety pin and make sure that everything fits nicely. So just have one last feel of how that feels, see whether it's pulling up or back, which I don't think it is. I think unfortunately with this, with the style of it, I'm going to end up with a bit of bra strap showing, which is like a little pet hate for me. What I might do if I was doing this again is I would probably cut away a bit more and make this less wide, because I think you could quite easily do that. You might need to add a bit more to the sleeve, to the bicep, but yeah, I think that's like a design of the pattern rather than anything. But yeah, that's looking really pretty. So yeah, I'm going to leave it at that for today, and I am going to attach the other shoulder, well, finish off the elastic on the other shoulder, and then I will be adding the skirt. So basically, to create the skirt, so we've got a little channel down at the bottom here. Well, I left quite a big channel, so it's about 2 inches, about 5 centimeters ish. So I'm going to join the skirt to this point, and then again, the same as I've done here, create a little channel. So you can see I've got plenty of space to create that channel, and thread some elastic through it so it pulls it all in, and that will pull the skirt in as well. And again, you want that to be pretty tight. You don't really want it to be all baggy around there. So the elastic is really going to hold everything in place. So yeah, I think that's going to look really nice. I'm very, very excited about it with my one puffy shoulder. So yeah, if you're getting excited about the camp and you haven't joined the WhatsApp group yet, you need to. We have set up a Crafty Camp 2022 WhatsApp group, and the chat has already started about what people are going to be wearing for the Wild West party, what people are going to be sewing, and we're also sharing some useful information about, you know, things that are available on site. What we've been asking some people to bring some things, and things like parking, getting there, what to do when you get there. I mean, it'll all be in your welcome pack, and we'll be sending out emails. If you haven't been receiving the emails and you are on the get on the list, if you've got your tickets, then please do get in touch to let us know. Because we've been sending out quite a lot of information on email. Yeah, and yeah, join the WhatsApp group. So if you want to join the WhatsApp group and you're coming and you haven't already, then just drop us an email and we will send you the link. That's no problem at all. And we'd love to get you involved in the conversation. So yeah, there are about 5 tickets left for the day at Crafty Camp, and we're closing ticket sales on Monday because we need to let the burrito guide know how many burritos to start making. And yeah, really, really happy to have an almost house. It's going to be really exciting, and yeah, I'm most excited about seeing people that I haven't seen for a year since the last sewing camp, but also seeing people making all new friends. There are lots of people that are coming by themselves or that haven't been before, and it's just really really warms my heart knowing that we're bringing people together to enjoy something that we all love and are all really passionate about. So wish me luck with finishing off my dress for the Saturday night, and if you're going to camp, I will see you there. If you're not, then please do sew along at home. Take a weekend for yourself if you can, or just a few hours, and enjoy it. And yeah, if you can't make it to camp, then still share with us what you've made over that weekend, and we would love to see it. We'll be flooding your social media, our social media channel and your social media feeds with all the things that people have been making after the camp, and we'd love to see whatever you've been making if you are sewing at home as well. Yeah, until then, I'll see you at camp, guys. Happy sewing. Bye.